Welcome to Wild West Love Chronicles. Today I'm going to tell you a story that is both deeply touching and full of suspense. So sit back, relax, and listen closely. The crowd roared beneath the great canvas, their cheers rising like thunder beneath the domed ceiling of the traveling circus tent. Firelight flickered across painted faces, sequins caught the glare, and music, bright, chaotic, relentless, filled every breath of air. Above them all, Clara stood on the edge of the trapeze platform, her bare feet balanced on the narrow beam. She could hear the ringmaster's voice booming through the speakers, laced with that ever-present tone of command. Velvet-wrapped iron. Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the sky, the girl with wings, Clara Moreau. The spotlight snapped to her face, painting her in pale gold. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She had long since trained herself to be a statue when the light found her. Beneath her, the safety net sagged like a lie. Her hands reached for the bar. Her heart pounded not with fear of the fall. She had made that leap 1,000 times, but with the terror of what would happen if she missed something else, if she hesitated, if she failed to smile, if she ran. She swung. 1, 2, 3 counts. Leapt into the air, arms slicing through the void with practiced grace. The crowd gasped. Clara caught the next bar, flipped, and landed again on the opposite platform with a perfect toe-pointed finish. The applause was deafening. It washed over her like cold water. Behind the curtain, Vincent Dalloway was watching. She could feel him even before she looked, could sense the pull of his stare like a thread yanked at the base of her spine. When she descended the ladder, she passed close enough to hear his voice. "You smiled late on the second swing." Again. Clara didn't respond. Her face remained blank, her breathing even. He stepped closer. "You know what happens if they stopped believing in the magic?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, sir." Vincent gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes and turned back to the next act, already barking orders at the clowns. Clara slipped into her trailer like a shadow. Her hands trembled as she peeled off the glittering costume, the sequins scraping her skin. She didn't look in the mirror. Mirrors showed too much. On the floor, her satchel waited, packed in secret over the past month with a change of clothes, a small jar of salve, a water bottle, and a torn photograph of a woman with Clara's eyes but a softer smile. Her mother, dead since Clara was 12. Her breath came fast as she wrapped her arms in a worn sweater, pulling on jeans and lacing up her boots with fingers stiff from rope burn. Tonight, she would fall, but not from the trapeze. Outside, the show's final act reached its peak. Music blasted. Fireworks lit the tent roof from below, and the crowd surged toward the exit. Clara slipped behind the storage trailer, her heart thudding in sync with the distant drums. She moved quickly but low, dodging lights, weaving through crates and elephant harnesses. The perimeter fence was weak near the back, behind the food tent. She had studied it for weeks, her hands scraped against the metal, fingers burning as she hauled herself over. On the other side, darkness, silence, the open world. She ran. The night air hit her like a slap, cold, wild, real. Trees loomed in the distance, their outlines black against a bruised sky. Thunder rolled far off. Storm clouds crawled across the moon. She didn't stop to watch. Her feet pounded the dirt, lungs aching, blood singing with something she had never truly felt before. Freedom. But it hurt. The wind grew colder as she moved away from the lights of the circus. Her limbs ached. Her ankle turned once in a pothole and she nearly fell, but she kept going. Branches scratched her face. Rocks tore at her knees. Her stomach screamed for food. She had only taken half a loaf of bread, stolen that morning and hidden under her bed. By the time the storm broke, she was 3 miles away. Rain came hard and fast, soaking her hair, her clothes, her boots. Lightning lit the fields around her in jagged bursts. Every noise felt like a scream, every shadow like a hand reaching to drag her back. She trudged through muddy pastures, climbing fences, sliding into gullies, forcing herself forward. There was no plan, just a way. She didn't remember falling, only that the world tipped sideways and her body hit the earth. Her ankle gave out, and the pain flared hot and bright. She screamed, more from fear than agony, and then pulled herself forward on her elbows until she reached the edge of a wide fence. The wire was taut, the wood strong. A ranch. She blinked against the rain. A house in the distance flickered with warm light, half obscured by trees. A barn loomed closer, its doors cracked open just enough to promise shelter. Clara crawled. The last of her strength gave out at the threshold. She collapsed half inside the barn, her soaked body crumpling on the straw. The smell of hay and horses filled her nose. She closed her eyes. That's where Elias found her. He had come out to check the north paddock after the lightning struck close. Habit mostly. The dog, a shaggy blue heeler named Hank, caught the scent first. The growl was low and uncertain, not aggressive, but alert. Elias followed the sound, and the dog's ears. There she was, a figure half hidden in shadow, curled on the barn floor, clothes torn, face streaked with blood and mud and rain. Elias didn't draw his rifle, but he didn't approach unguarded, either. "Who are you?" he asked, voice low. She didn't answer. He stepped closer, boots crunching straw, eyes scanning her for weapons. None. Just a girl, no older than 25, soaked to the bone and barely conscious. "You alive?" She shifted slightly, then nodded, barely. "Got a name?" Her lips moved. No sound came out. Elias sighed. "I'm not gonna hurt you, but you're trespassing." She opened her eyes then. Wide, dark, terrified. She pushed herself up with trembling arms. "Please," she whispered. "Just let me stay till morning." He studied her. She was shaking, not from fear, but cold. Her fingers clutched a small satchel like it held her whole life. Elias ran a hand down his jaw. "Damn it all. There's a cot in the tack room. You don't touch anything. You don't leave it till I say. Understood?" She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. He moved aside and gestured. "Come on." She tried to stand and winced, her left ankle unable to bear weight. Elias cursed under his breath, stepped forward, and lifted her before she could protest. She weighed nothing, a scarecrow of a girl, all bone and wet cloth and exhaustion. She flinched at his touch, but didn't pull away. Inside the tack room, he laid her on the cot and handed her a dry blanket from the wall hook. The dog hovered nearby, suspicious but calm. "I'll bring you something hot, then we'll talk." She grabbed his sleeve. "No names, please." Elias looked at her, really looked. The bruise on her cheek, the cut above her brow, the tremble in her voice that wasn't just cold. He nodded once. "Fine." He left her in the dark with the storm raging outside. In the kitchen, he poured hot soup into a thermos and packed a slice of cornbread in a towel. He stared at the rain on the window for a long moment, then returned to the barn. She was asleep when he came back, blanket clutched tight, the satchel still under her arm like a lifeline. He left the food beside her, covered her feet with a second blanket, and turned off the light. She didn't stir. That night, Elias Carter lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of the storm folding into the echo of a girl's voice. "Just let me stay till morning." And for reasons he didn't yet understand, he did. The sun came up slow, spilling pale light across the wet grass and the wide Wyoming sky. The storm had broken sometime before dawn, leaving behind a hush that hung over the Carter ranch like a held breath. A few crows called from the tree line, and the wind moved through the tall grass like a whisper. Elias stepped out onto the porch, steaming mug in hand, eyes on the barn. It had been years since a stranger had crossed his fence uninvited. He had built this life around silence, around predictability, and he guarded it the way a man guards a wound. But now, in his tack room, a girl lay wrapped in two of his best blankets with a bruised face and a story she hadn't told. He didn't like mysteries, but he hated cruelty more. He finished the coffee, then went to check on her. She was awake when he entered, sitting up, hugging the satchel to her chest like it might float her through the next flood. Her eyes flicked to the thermos and the uneaten cornbread, then to him. "Morning," he said. She nodded stiffly. Storm's gone. You're not. She looked away. I'll go. Didn't say that. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You hungry? She hesitated, then nodded. Finish what I left. I'll bring more. Why? He tilted his head slightly. Why? What? Why are you helping me? Elias shrugged. 'Cause you look like hell. And I figure whatever put that look in your eyes, it wasn't your fault. She stared at him like she was waiting for something else, some demand, some condition. When none came, she finally picked up the thermos and took a sip. She winced at the heat, then sipped again. The warmth worked its way into her hands, her shoulders, her voice. You don't know me. Not yet. She set the thermos down. Then maybe I should leave before you do. Elias didn't smile. You can stand on that ankle? She looked at her leg. The swelling was worse today, skin purple and tight around the bone. Her mouth tightened. I'll manage. He stepped forward, kneeling beside the cot to get a better look. Let me see. She tried to pull her leg back. He raised a brow. Look, I've seen worse. Worked cattle, pulled fence posts, once had to stitch a man's thigh with twine because we were 20 miles from the clinic. I'm not going to hurt you. Reluctantly, she let him lift the edge of her jeans. He examined the swelling, hands gentle but sure. You'll need to stay off it a few days. I'll wrap it. Got crutches in the back. I can't stay. You can't walk. She looked at him, jaw clenched. What if someone comes looking? Elias met her gaze. Should I be worried? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. He stood. You got a name yet? No. He rubbed a hand over his beard. Well, I'm not going to keep calling you girl. You pick one. She hesitated, then said, Leah. It wasn't true. He could hear it in the way her voice caught on the word, but he nodded anyway. All right, Leah. Come on, let's get you settled somewhere warmer than this barn. He didn't ask again. She barely spoke as he helped her into the ranch house. She limped with most of her weight on him, her jaw set, her eyes scanning everything. The pictures on the wall, the worn leather couch, the boots by the door, as if memorizing the escape routes. He settled her on the couch with pillows and a folded blanket beneath her leg. The dog followed, lying nearby, tail thumping once. Elias made oatmeal, strong coffee, and scrambled eggs. She ate like someone who hadn't had a hot breakfast in a long time, quietly and quickly. Afterward, he said, I'll be out fixing fence most of the day. If you need anything, the dog'll find me. She nodded. He was almost out the door when her voice stopped him. Thank you. He looked back. You're welcome. For the next few days, she didn't speak unless spoken to. She stayed inside, leg elevated, watching the fields from the big window that overlooked the back pasture. She never asked for more than what she was given, never explored beyond the living room and bathroom. But Elias noticed small things. The way she folded the blankets perfectly when she got up, the way she rinsed her plate before setting it in the sink. He saw the glances she gave the dog, the horses, the sky. Like she couldn't believe they were real. She never took her satchel off. On the 4th day, he returned from checking the fence line to find her in the kitchen, leaning on one crutch and peeling potatoes. Didn't ask you to cook, he said. You didn't ask me to stay either. He watched her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. She asked him that night if he needed help in the barn. He told her not yet. A week passed. Her limp improved. He caught her outside once, sitting on the porch steps with the dog's head in her lap. She was humming softly, eyes closed. The sound froze him in place. It wasn't the tune. It was the way she sang it, not like someone performing, but like someone remembering. She noticed him, flushed, and stopped. Sorry, no need. Just an old lullaby. He didn't press. The next morning, she offered to feed the chickens. He watched her through the window, crutch tucked under one arm, scattering grain with the other. The hens clucked and swarmed her feet. She laughed, a real laugh, sudden and startled, as one jumped to grab a flake of feed from her hand. Elias hadn't heard a sound like that in the house for 5 years. He turned away. Later that week, he brought her an old pair of boots, cleaned and laced. Don't fit. We'll find another pair. She took them gently, tracing the stitching with her thumb. "These were your wife's?" He nodded once. "You sure? She would have liked you." That night she cooked stew. They ate outside on the porch, the wind soft and full of stars. "You ever been out west before?" he asked. She shook her head. "First time I've seen the sky go all the way down. Gets real quiet at night. Some folks hate it. I don't." He waited. She said, "It's the first quiet I've ever liked." The words hung between them like something fragile. The next day she asked to ride. He raised a brow. "You sure?" She nodded. "I know how." He saddled the gentlest mare and walked beside her, hand near the reins. She rode stiff at first, but within 10 minutes she sat straighter, one hand in the horse's mane, the other gripping the horn. "Looks like you've done this before." She gave a small smile, only when they weren't watching. The breeze caught her hair, lifting strands away from her face. Her eyes were brighter than he'd seen them. Over the following days, she helped more. Watering the garden, brushing the horses, fixing a broken latch on the barn door. She worked hard, asked nothing, and sometimes talked in her sleep. He heard her once, through the thin wall, whispering, "No, please, I'll do better." He didn't mention it. One afternoon, he found her kneeling in the dirt near the western fence, staring at a bird with a broken wing. She cupped it in her hands, murmured something soft, then stood and looked at him. "It's going to die." He nodded, but it didn't ask to. Most don't. She turned away, tears falling silently, and buried the bird beneath a cottonwood tree. That night she sat by the fire, legs curled beneath her, and asked, "Do you always live alone? Don't like the noise, but you let me stay. You're quiet." She looked into the flames. "I used to be loud. I don't know who that girl was anymore." Elias didn't answer. He just let her sit. The weather turned warmer. Her limp nearly vanished. She laughed more, and sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she sang. But she never gave her real name, and she never let go of the satchel. One evening he asked, "You running from someone?" She froze. "Not asking why," he said. "Just need to know if I should keep the gate locked." She looked at him, eyes wide, then said, quietly, "Yes. All right." She exhaled. Her shoulders dropped, and something unspoken passed between them. That night, Elias dreamed of wings, torn and mended, catching wind over an open field. He woke before dawn, heart full of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Summer on the plains came in slow waves, long stretches of golden heat interrupted by brief storms that rose like giants and vanished in their own footprints. The grass thickened, cattle lazed in shade, and the days stretched wide and soft, each one blurring gently into the next. On the Carter Ranch, the quiet became less empty, less waiting. It filled with the subtle rhythm of two people moving around each other, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but always orbiting the same silence that no longer felt so alone. Clara stood barefoot at the edge of the pasture, watching the sky ripple with clouds. The mare she'd been brushing nosed her hand, warm breath trailing across her fingers. She smiled without thinking, not the tight, brittle expression she used to wear when performing, but something looser, quieter, more real. Elias was fixing the west fence line again, something about coyotes testing the wire. He didn't say much when he worked, and he didn't expect her to either. That, more than anything, was why she'd stayed. He didn't press, didn't pull. He let her settle into herself at her own pace. She'd been there over a month, long enough that her skin had tanned, her arms had grown stronger, and her nights were filled with fewer nightmares. She still locked the bathroom door, still kept her satchel near her bed. But she no longer jumped at every sound. The wind in the trees didn't sound like chains anymore. She turned toward the barn, limping only slightly now. The crutches were long gone. The boots he'd given her, his wife's, fit well after all. She oiled them twice a week, as if grateful for the memory they carried. Inside the barn, she swept the stalls with practiced care, humming under her breath. The song had no words, just a soft rise and fall like something remembered from before everything had fallen apart. The dog, Hank, followed her from stall to stall, tail wagging in slow arcs. He didn't beg for attention, just stayed close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. She liked that. At lunch, Elias returned, dust streaking his shirt, a smear of grease on his knuckles. He washed his hands at the sink while she stirred stew on the stove. "You didn't have to cook," he said, as always. "You didn't have to bring me boots," she answered, as always. They ate at the small table by the window. He told her about a bull getting tangled in wire, and she told him about a hen that laid an egg the size of her palm. He didn't laugh much, but he smiled more now. Not big smiles, but the kind that softened the lines around his eyes. She noticed them. She noticed a lot of things, like the way he always touched the top of the doorframe when he walked inside, or how he used his thumb to count instead of his pointer, or how he stopped to listen when she hummed, even if he didn't say a word. After lunch, they sat on the porch. She leaned back against the rail, bare feet on the lowest step, eyes closed. "You ever miss it?" he asked. Her eyes opened slowly. "Miss what?" "Where you came from. The circus." She didn't answer right away. A breeze stirred the grass, and the dog sighed at her feet. "I miss the trapeze," she said at last. "The air, the weightlessness. When you're up there, everything else disappears. You're not a person. You're a bird, a breath. You're between the beat of a heart." He looked at her. "And the rest of it?" She wrapped her arms around her knees. "The rest of it was a cage." He nodded and didn't ask more. That night, she watched him from the doorway as he played with an old radio. It barely caught a signal, just static and distant twangs. But he fiddled with it like it mattered, like sometimes just trying was enough. She stepped into the room. "Do you dance?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Not since my wedding." She walked toward him, slowly. "Then you're due." He chuckled. "There's no music." "Doesn't mean we can't dance." He hesitated, then stood. She reached for his hand, and they stood there, awkwardly at first. Then they moved. Slowly. Gently. Just enough to sway. Her head fit against his chest. His arms knew what to do, even if his heart didn't yet. She closed her eyes and let the silence fill with something that wasn't memory or fear. Just breath. Just warmth. Afterward, she kissed his cheek and whispered, "Good night." The next morning, she didn't wake up screaming. Instead, she went into town. He'd offered to take her before, but she always refused. Too many eyes, too many chances for someone to recognize her. But something had shifted. Something inside her had begun to trust the ground beneath her feet. Maybe it was the land. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was just time. They drove in his old truck. The seats creaked. The windows stuck. She rode with one hand on her satchel, but her eyes were calm. Town was small. One main road. A diner, a feed store, a post office, and a church with peeling paint. She wore a hat, low over her brow, hair tucked up, sleeves long despite the heat. He bought supplies. She lingered by the books in the market, picked up a packet of seeds, talked quietly to the woman at the counter about tomatoes. No one stared. No one knew her name. They stopped at the cafe on the way back, sat outside with lemonade and pie. "I didn't think I could do it," she said softly. "Looked to me like you did." She smiled. "Yeah, I guess I did." On the drive home, she reached over and turned the radio knob. It caught a faint station. Country, old stuff. Patsy Cline. She sang along under her breath. He didn't say anything, just listened. Later that week, they mended fences together. Side by side, hands busy, silence companionable. He said, "You thinking about staying longer?" She paused. "Would that be all right?" He looked at her. "You already are." That night she stood under the stars, barefoot in the grass. The wind tugged at her shirt. She lifted her arms and spun once, just once, like she used to on stage. But slower. Wiser. He watched from the porch, a beer in hand, heart too full to speak. The next day she planted the seeds. A week passed. Then 2. Summer deepened. Heat shimmered off the fence posts. The cattle napped in clusters. The horses kicked dust in the shade. She brought him lemonade at noon, a cloth draped over her neck. He drank, wiped his brow, and said, "You're starting to look like a rancher." She laughed. "Don't say that. I might stay." He looked at her, and something in his chest cracked open. "Stay," he said. She didn't answer with words. Just stepped forward, pressed her forehead against his, and whispered, "I'm tired of running." He held her. That night she told him her real name, not all the details. Not yet, but enough. His arms didn't tighten, they didn't pull away, they just held her. And for the first time in her life, Clara felt what it meant to be still. The circus came back without warning. Clara had just finished hanging fresh laundry behind the barn when she saw the poster flapping against the bulletin board outside the feed store. It hadn't been there the day before. She was certain of it. The colors were as garish as ever, gold and crimson ink, curling letters, a painted lion snarling in the corner. But it was the name that stopped her heart. Dalloway's Grand Traveling Menagerie. 2 nights only. 4th of July weekend. Special performance under the stars. She didn't blink. Didn't breathe. The wind snapped the poster's edge like a whip, and still, she stood rooted, eyes burning holes through the ink. The same font. The same threats dressed as excitement. The same name. She turned, left the feed store without buying the salt she'd come for, and walked quickly down the sidewalk, eyes down, boots pounding harder than she meant. People passed her. Nobody noticed, nobody stopped her, but she felt it all over again, that old heat crawling up her spine like a rope pulled tight. She didn't run. Not yet. Elias was in the east field when she found him, shirt off, shoulders bronzed with sun, hands dirty from digging a trench near the irrigation line. He looked up when he heard her truck tires crunching gravel, but the smile on his face faded the moment he saw hers. "What happened?" She didn't speak, just held out the poster. He took it from her, eyes scanning the page slowly. When he looked up, his jaw was tight. "How long?" "This weekend." They move fast. Always have. He folded the poster once, carefully, then again, tighter, like compressing a wound. "Come inside," he said. She sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a glass of water she didn't drink. Elias paced once, then twice, then finally stopped across from her. "I take it they'll be looking for you." "I don't know," she said. "Maybe. He saw me dance once, on a night I thought I was alone. He always remembered everything. If he's here, and he sees me." She didn't finish. Elias nodded once, then sat. "You want to run?" She shook her head. "No, I want to stop running. But I don't want to put you in danger." He reached across the table, took her hand. "You already stayed. I already let you." A long silence stretched between them. Then she said, "His name is Vincent Dalloway. He took me when I was 12. My mother had just died, and he promised me a life of adventure. Lights, applause. I didn't know what that meant. Not really. I performed for crowds before I even learned how to say no." Elias didn't interrupt. "I tried to leave once, when I was 17, got as far as the next state line. He sent 2 men after me. Told the police I was mentally unstable and under contract. I didn't even know what that meant. He had papers, always papers. He said they were proof." She swallowed hard. "He hit me for the first time that night. After the police sent me back. I didn't try again until now." Elias squeezed her hand. "I'm not afraid of work," she said. "I'm not afraid of hard living, but I'm terrified of being owned." He said, "You're not." But she didn't smile. Not yet. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stood outside under the stars, arms wrapped tight around her chest, watching the sky for something she couldn't name. The moon was full, the wind gentle. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like a clock ticking louder and louder. Elias came out and wrapped a blanket over her shoulders. He didn't say anything. Just stood beside her. She said, "If he finds me, I'll deal with him." "How?" He didn't answer. But his silence carried weight. 2 days later, the circus tents went up just beyond town. Red and white stripes, visible even from the edge of the ranch. Banners flapped. Lights strung up between poles blinked like distant threats. Clara went to town anyway. She wore a hat again. Glasses. Hair tucked low and braided. But her back was straight. Her step steady. She bought flour, salt, and feed. Spoke to the clerk. Laughed at a child who dropped a watermelon in front of the register. She was walking back toward the truck when it happened. Vincent Dalloway stepped from the general store. He looked older, grayer at the temples. But his posture hadn't changed. Neither had his eyes. They locked onto her like heat-seeking fire. She froze. "Clara," he said, too loud, like he already owned her name again. She turned, heart hammering, and walked faster. He followed. "You don't get to ignore me." She reached her truck, opened the door, but he caught the edge and slammed it shut. "Don't make this ugly," he said. "You know you're still under contract. You know I can take you back." She turned slowly. "I'm not yours. You signed the papers. I've got them. Witnesses. You think you can run away and play farm girl with some dust-covered hick? You're mine, Clara." His voice was quiet now, too quiet. "You don't own me," she whispered. His smile twisted. "We'll see about that." He walked away. She drove back to the ranch, shaking. Elias saw her coming, saw the pale edge of fear on her face, and didn't ask questions. That night, he cleaned the rifle. The next morning, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. The deputy was young, nervous, said he had papers, a private complaint. Claimed ownership of property, human property. Elias stared him down until the man lost his nerve. "You want her, you come back with a court order," Elias said. 2 hours later, Vincent came himself. This time, he brought another man, older, in a suit. A lawyer, maybe. Papers again, thick and official-looking. Clara read them in silence. Her hands shook. "It's fake," Elias said. "It's notarized," Vincent said, "and she signed it. Says she belongs to Dalloway Entertainment through 2027. A binding performance contract. She was a minor," Elias said, "and abused. Do you have proof of that?" Vincent smiled. "She has bruises." "She fell off a horse," Vincent said. "She's always been clumsy, but she's valuable, and she's mine." Elias stepped forward, jaw clenched. "Get off my land." "You can't stop this," Vincent said. "You think you can hide her forever? The law is on my side." Elias stared at him, then said, "We'll see." Vincent left. Clara stood by the porch post, shaking, not with fear, with fury. "I won't go back," she said. "You won't," Elias said. They drove to town the next morning, papers in hand. Birth records, a medical journal she'd kept hidden in her satchel. Elias had called a friend, an old lawyer from Cheyenne who owed him a favor. They made a case, filed counterclaims, argued for emancipation, for abuse, submitted testimony. It went to court that Thursday. Clara stood in front of the judge, back straight, voice strong. She told the truth. About the bruises, the locked trailer, the missed meals, the threats, the lies. She told them how she performed for thousands, with a smile, while her wrists bled from practice ropes. How she was never allowed to speak to the press. How every time she hesitated, he reminded her of the contract, of her debt, of her worth. And then she told them how she ran, How she found peace on a ranch owned by a man who never once raised his voice, never once asked more than she gave. When it was over, the courtroom was silent. The judge ruled that the contract was invalid, that Vincent had no claim, that Clara was free. Vincent exploded, cursed, threatened. He had to be escorted out. Clara sat down slowly, hands folded in her lap. Elias touched her shoulder. "You're free," he said. She nodded. But it didn't feel real. Not yet. It would take time. But that night, back at the ranch, she unpacked her satchel for the first time, folded the old costume, burned the contract, and slept with the window open. The world didn't change overnight. The sky didn't brighten with new colors, and the grass didn't grow any greener. But Clara breathed differently now. She stood taller. The weight that had settled between her shoulder blades since childhood, sharp and silent like a blade, had finally been removed. And yet, she kept touching the place where it used to be, not out of habit but disbelief. The ranch greeted her return with the same quiet it always offered, but this time it felt different. It felt like it was hers, too. She didn't unpack her things. She didn't have to. Most of her belongings were already spread throughout the house. Her toothbrush in the cup by the sink, her boots by the back door, a sweater draped over the couch arm, flour on the cabinet handle from where she always rested her hand. The life she'd been living in pieces now came together without anyone telling her it was allowed. That morning, she made biscuits from scratch and fried eggs until the edges were crisp and golden. Elias came in from the pasture with dew still clinging to his jeans and the sun painting warm lines across his face. He stepped into the kitchen and paused like he was seeing something holy. She stood barefoot, hair a mess, sleeves rolled up, humming under her breath as she stirred gravy in the pan. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She turned, handed him a plate, and said, "Today's for building." Building what? Everything. They ate on the porch, boots tapping gently against the steps, and watched the cattle shuffle through early haze. Birds darted low, weaving between blades of golden light. The world went on as though nothing had happened. But Clara knew something had. Inside her, inside him. Later, she saddled the mare herself, confident and precise, and met Elias near the fence line where a section of barbed wire had sagged. They worked without words, passing tools, holding posts, straightening lines. Sweat glistened on their skin, but neither of them noticed. The labor felt good, real. And with every staple driven, every knot tied, she felt herself pulling something tighter into place inside her chest. Around midday, she reached into her shirt pocket and pulled out a folded paper, creased and worn at the edges. "What's that?" Elias asked, wiping his brow with a bandana. "My mother's name," she said, "and the town she was born in." He leaned closer, squinting at the handwriting. "You think she still has family there?" "I don't know. I've always wondered, but the circus never let me look." He nodded slowly. "You want to go?" "Someday. Maybe." "You won't go alone." She looked at him, eyes soft. "I wasn't planning to." They loaded the tools into the truck and drove back in a slow silence. The kind that wasn't empty, but full of all the things they didn't need to explain anymore. When they reached the barn, Elias paused, still behind the wheel. "You know," he said, voice low, "when you first showed up, I thought you were trouble." "I was. But not the kind I feared." She smiled. "What kind, then?" "The kind a man doesn't know he needed until it's already too late." She reached over and placed her hand over his. "Then it's a good thing you're stubborn." That night they opened the windows wide. A storm had passed through in the distance, leaving the air sharp and clean. Fireflies dotted the grass like floating embers, and the porch creaked under the weight of 2 rocking chairs pulled closer than they had been before. Clara reached into the basket at her feet and pulled out a letter. She'd been writing one every week since the trial ended, small notes folded in blank envelopes with no address. She didn't know who she was writing to, maybe some version of herself that still needed to hear it. This one said, "You are not what they made you. You are what you choose next." She folded it neatly and placed it on the pile beside her. Tomorrow it would join the others in a box she kept beneath the bed, a growing archive of healing. Elias leaned back, eyes closed, face turned toward the wind. "I was thinking," he said. "Dangerous," she teased. He smiled. "We could turn the old bunkhouse into something useful, maybe a workshop, or a place for guests." "Guests? You're not the only one who's ever run from something." Clara looked at him, the idea sinking deep. "You want to open this place to others?" "I want to do something with the land besides survive on it." She took a deep breath, then nodded. "Then, let's do it." Over the next month, they worked side by side. They cleared out the bunkhouse, scrubbed the wood, repaired the roof, and built bunk beds from old beams Elias had stored in the shed. They painted the walls a soft cream, hung curtains Clara had sewn from flour sacks, and planted wildflowers around the porch. The sign came last, burned into oak by Clara's careful hand. It read, "The Haven." No big announcement, no ads in the paper, just word of mouth, whispered from one friend to another. A quiet space for women in trouble, for men who'd lost their way, for souls bruised by the world and needing rest. Clara became the heart of it. She taught the girls how to braid rope and make stew and mend fence. She didn't ask questions they weren't ready to answer. Elias handled the books, fixed the generators, taught boys how to ride without fear. They never called it therapy. It didn't need a name. They just called it living. On the 6-month anniversary of the trial, Clara stood by the cottonwood tree where she had buried the bird with the broken wing. She laid a single yellow flower in the dirt and whispered, "You were right. We didn't ask for it, but we made it out." Behind her, Elias waited with 2 mugs of coffee and a new letter in his hand. She turned and walked back to him. They stood together as the wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and summer and something too tender to name. She leaned into him, his arms strong around her back. "I want to marry you," he said. She laughed, startled, then softened. "Why now?" "Because I finally believe you're staying." "I was always staying." "I know." They didn't have a church wedding, didn't wear white, but the whole town showed up. Every soul who had heard her story and seen her fight. Clara wore a blue dress, hair down, eyes bright. Elias wore his cleanest shirt and his old boots and looked at her like the sun had come down to live on his porch. They said their vows under the open sky, with cattle lowing in the background and wind chimes clinking softly. When the officiant asked if they had anything they wanted to say, Clara stepped forward and held Elias's hand. "You didn't save me," she said. "You let me save myself. And then you loved me for who I was after." His voice cracked when he answered, "You taught me how to speak again." They kissed, and the crowd clapped, and somewhere far away, the circus packed its tents for another town, unaware that they'd lost their star not to escape, but to something far more dangerous. Hope. Later that evening, Clara walked the fence line alone, boots dusty, heart full. The sun dipped low, painting everything in honey and fire. The barn cast a long shadow behind her, and the cottonwoods whispered secrets she no longer feared. She stopped and looked out over the field, remembering the first night she crawled through mud and blood and fear to reach that fence. The way her body collapsed. The way Elias carried her inside without asking who she was. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman. She turned and walked back toward the house. Home. Some journeys don't end with a roar of applause or a final curtain call, but with the quiet of a porch at dusk, the warmth of steady hands, and the choice to stay when you're finally free to go. Clara didn't just escape the circus. She reclaimed her name, her strength, and her place in a world that once forgot her. And in the arms of a quiet rancher, she found not only shelter, but a love worth building a life around. If stories of resilience, romance, and redemption under wide-open skies speak to your heart, make sure to hit subscribe and join us here at Wild West Love Chronicles. We bring you powerful tales of love forged in the dust and silence of the frontier, where hearts are wild, wounds run deep, and second chances bloom in the most unexpected places. Don't miss the next ride into the sunset. Saddle up and subscribe now.